Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Valerie David, and this is the night session. Tonight, I'm here with Stephanie Epple, who you should remember from our Box Seats podcast about the woes of the WTA. But now it's time to talk US Open 2017. Welcome, Steph.
Hey Val, it's good to be here and talking about tennis we were actually able to see throughout.
Yeah, I thought the tennis was better in like the middle of the tournament than the finals turned out to be. We just watched the men's final. How did you enjoy napping through it?
It was a little bit of a slow start, but I felt like Kevin probably came out with more energy and then kind of lost it, whereas Rafa kind of just seemed like he had more spring in his step the longer the match went. But overall it's kind of what I expected. I mean, Rafa's been in this position many times. Kevin's first time, best of five, fitness wise, size wise, it just kind of felt like it was Rafa's tournament. And I do think there were some points that seemed, like fun. But I think overall there really wasn't any doubt that Rafa was going to pull that out. So I suppose if you're wanting some more drama, the final didn't deliver, but they often don't. It's always a hard sort of thing to expect that level in a final. But it's just how it fell this year.
Yeah, a lot of times, yeah, when like dramatic things happen in the beginning of the tournament, it's like great up to a certain point, and then
Mm-hmm.
you end up with a final like this that can't be helped because it's like you said, all those things about the difference between these two players
Yeah.
is just too great. And I had kind of wasn't sure what to expect because honestly, Rafa's draw, there was not a lot of competition for him the whole tournament. And so you start thinking, well, we don't actually, he looks great, but, might something happen where then he'll, maybe his form isn't as perfect as we thought it was or whatever. But then when they came out and you could feel how nervous Anderson was.
Mm-hmm.
And you start thinking about, oh my God, Rafa's won so many of these. He's played on this court so many times. And Anderson, just came back from a long injury layover. And,
Mm-hmm.
this was like a huge tournament for him with all this great stuff. And then how momentous this is. And then you're like, ah, crap.
We see it. It's pretty rare. I mean, I remember when Stan, your man, made his first slam
Yes.
final, and I didn't wake up because of the time difference, and I kind of thought, oh, geez, Rafa's never lost. That and Stan played great, and you just don't know. I mean, we get maiden winners that take their first finals, but I mean, you mentioned something I get sensitive about, but I'm a Rafa fan, but the draw was already going to be different because we had so many withdrawals on the men's side.
Yes.
And, if Rafa had played Federer, well, that would have made everything better. But because he played Del Potro, even though, I mean, geez, Del Potro was no easy out, slam
Right.
winner, always
Right.
dangerous. Like, he still had to get past him. And, yes, the bottom half, I mean, it's not a surprise that they didn't play a top 20 player, but we do 32 seeds. If we went back to 16 seeds, which I've always supported, you're going to have top players playing higher ranked players, but the way that it's set up, it's just not like that. And, you can only play who you play, but I get, in fact, I'm on a Twitter break. I'm just kind of tired of the just negativity on every part of fandom. You're like, oh, well, you really didn't deserve that because that player didn't play well, or, oh, you didn't face a top 10 player. But I mean, how
Right.
many of the men, you follow men more than I do, but how many of the top 10 pulled out? Was it 5 before this tournament
Yeah. Yeah.
started?
Yeah. Somewhere around there. It was
Yeah, which,
ridiculous.
I mean,
It's like devastation.
yeah, I mean, and you hear all sorts of um, explanations if, the equipment's too much or, what's happening, but it's just how things fell this year. It's been a funky year. But, then you look at the two old dudes who are still like, the amongst the best, male players, and that doesn't go away. But I mean, I still think there was enough drama throughout the men's draw. Um, but I, was happy for Kevin. I thought that, it's been an interesting tournament just because of all the comeback stories. this whole year has been a lot of comebacks from different things, whether it's maternity leave or from doping suspensions or from surgeries. And so Kevin kind of reaching that pinnacle I thought was awesome. He's just a lovely person. His wife Kelsey's awesome. He and Rafa are good friends. I just thought, oh, this, I don't expect this to be a 4 or 5 set gritty final, but it was a nice match. And sometimes I guess that's all I can expect out of a final.
Right. Yeah. No, and I agree about that. I'm not saying like Rafa needs to be asterisked or anything about this tournament. I just meant that it's like sometimes you can't tell what somebody's form is when they're playing a guy.
He looked pretty. He didn't look great. It's funny because he didn't look great to start with. I don't know who did. I mean, Federer struggled through the first two. Yeah. I mean, 6-4 in the fifth against Tiafoe. I mean, there were some struggle buses. And I don't know who you could say looked like they were in stellar form. I mean, Alex Zverev, who did so great this summer. I mean, did he lose in the first or second round?
Yeah, second, I think.
I think it was second round. And, you sort of look at who did well this summer. And, I mean, it was quite, I guess it was unpredictable to an extent, but yet I don't feel like there was any like flawless player throughout. I think there was just a lot of grit kind of seen through the men's side. But, an interesting slam year for sure. I mean, 2 Federer, 2 Nadal wins. I don't know. When, you think at the end of last year and Murray just swept all these things and climbed to #1 and, Novak hadn't won a slam in a few slams and you're thinking, geez. I mean, it's been a mind-boggling year on the men's tour. And, the narrative around everything now is even just stranger. I think people are just trying to figure out, what does this mean going forward? Is Novak going to be back healthy? Is Murray going to be the same again? And I mean, obviously Federer's had a career without huge injuries. This back is, I mean, it's what happens. It's what happened to Agassi. He fought through a lot of back pain towards the end of his career. And, I mean, Rafa's had his share, but seems to be better now. So it's just, it's a wait and see, but we'll see how the rest of the year turns out for the ATP. But London's going to be different this year, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember Rafa said something a few years ago when Djokovic was winning, every tournament, every slam, and Rafa said nothing lasts forever. It may seem like, he's just going to keep winning and none of us can ever do anything. He goes, but I won all of, 2010 and then look what happened in 2011. Right. And I think that's kind of what this year is an example of. It's like, I don't think anyone would have predicted, like, even like you'd say, well, Roger's got 7 months to rest or whatever, that, maybe he could win a slam. He was in the conversation when he came back, but for them to, to have a full Fedal 2017, it's absurd. And
I'm looking at the race to London, and of course, Thiem is #4. I mean, it's not a bad looking 8 right now. I mean, Novak still managed to be at 8. Obviously, he won't be there, but and of course, Stan shut it down. So it's really going to be, again, I mean, Query's probably going to get in, and Berdych always seems to kind of squeeze himself in there. But speaking of Thiem, I guess most people would sort of point to that as the match of the tournament. I was driving back from Iowa, and so I was in the car and I looked at the first 2 sets and I was like, oh, Del Potro, why don't you just call it a day? Like, we know you're sick, what are you doing? And of course, fast forward 3 hours, it's like, oh, look, Delpo won with a Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer nose. Do you think that was match of the tournament in the men's, just for everything that was around it, or did you see other matches you thought were just the best?
That one was like, as far as like all the like the drama and the honestly the quality, it's it's like, even though it's like Dom was up 2 sets and then went down, it's like that was because Delpo really came back crazy, torching Fearhand and all. I mean, there were some really incredible points and stuff in that. So another one I personally liked was the Borna Coric Zverev match.
Okay.
Especially because I watched the two of them play each other in Cincy a few years ago. And it was kind of an interesting thing because I remember I was interested in that match because they were two players that everybody was kind of talking about.
Yeah.
And I was, in the pit for that. So I was like up close. And I remember thinking at that time that I'm like, these guys are both kind of bashers. They're just sort of just wailing on the ball. And I'm like, and Borna's got like a little, I feel like he's got a little more finesse and he's like thinking a little bit more out there. And Borna did end up winning that match. And it was like right after that match, I went and saw Dimitrov Pospisil.
Okay.
Which was like one of the best matches I've ever seen live. And it was all this like creativity and net play. And it was like such a stark, contrast.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting to see these two kids play again now that they've both like improved their game. But it was funny then to me because it was like the same match again. Like Borna had that little extra, was thinking things, planning them out. And,
okay.
And Sascha was just kind of bashing away and not knowing why it wasn't working. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And also because when I was in Cincy, there were some kind of rumors, overheard conversations, kind of things that Sascha just pulled the plug on Cincy. That he that he just was telling his coach he just wanted to go to the USO. And
interesting.
And this is just pure rumor. I don't, I didn't hear it, but that was kind of the word around the tournament. It was kind of like, and people were saying, like he didn't win in straights. Then it was like he just let the match go because I want to get to New York and play the important tournament. And so then if that is the case, then that backfired.
Well, and I heard he was pretty testy. Well, I've heard, I don't know if I was listening to a podcast or somebody was talking about, he can be a little bit testy with press and, if he, especially after he lost in Cincinnati, but, I think the narrative around him's always been best of 5 is just difficult for him. And, he's so tall and so skinny, even though he's put a little bit of weight on, but, it's an endurance test in New York and best of 5. And he's definitely someone people are super excited to see. I mean, I saw that in Cincy of the number of people that wanted to see him practice and really get a look at him. And so, it kind of goes back to the whole favorite conversation, which honestly, I think I might have muted that word on Twitter. I'm like, for the love of God, you just stop trying to pick this. Like there is no really right now in tennis, like it's such a crapshoot. I get so annoyed by the whole favorite conversation. I understand there's betting and there's going to be odds, but and what got funny through the men's side was Shapovalov, and I've got to get his name. I kind of just make fun, but Dennis, all of a sudden, in that bottom half, everyone picked him, thinking, oh yeah, he's going to make his first final. I'm like, he's young and it's not far, crazier things have happened. But I was getting so irritated with this favorite conversation because I'm thinking you're looking at all these players, all who have a huge opportunity. And it's not just because Murray pulled out. It's not just because Novak. It was people like Monfils losing or Kyrgios losing or, Dimitrov and, some of the other kind of, I guess, second tier kind of top guys. That's a lost opportunity for them. And I just don't, so I just didn't think that it was really fair to kind of be thinking that this, young Canadian was going to be, Rafa just got to press, so I just had to go mute my TV because I had the press conference channel on the US Open. But, I wasn't surprised to see Kevin pull out of that. In fact, he was my early pick because I thought, you know what? He's had a really good summer. He's healthy again. He's very experienced. So that's who I kind of thought had a great shot. And what do you know? He made the final, and there you go.
Yeah. No, I for me personally, it's like I was disappointed in like Grigor and Pui, and that Borna didn't make it out after taking out Sascha, but he lost to Kevin Anderson in the next round. So that's a little less upsetting now because you're like, well. But I remember about like the quarters. I was thinking, I'm like, everyone's we're all kind of pissed about kind of the flashy players that we like didn't make it through. And I went, but Pablo and Kevin, like they're the ones that won. They worked hard.
Yeah.
they played their matches well. They were calm and composed, and they did what they needed to do. And it's like we shouldn't be all acting pissed off that
Well,
these guys
no,
got
and
through. Like,
Pablo didn't lose a set until he got to. Did he make it to the semis without losing a set, or with the quarters?
yes, yeah,
And of course, I mean, I hadn't really watched a lot of him in singles for a while. I mean, but I mean, yeah, he's a bit of a wall, and it was nice. I mean, I enjoyed watching some ATP players that I don't watch very often. So for me, like that was kind of the nice change of pace from, just seeing. And it's not like I mean, of course, I wish all these players were here. It was definitely a void not having Stan, not having, Novak and Kay and all these guys. And it's like, this sucks. But, I watch some players that I don't know that much about their games. And, Carina Busta had a great tournament. I was happy for him making that far. But, yeah, I mean, you can't take away from the experience that they'll get making those rounds, even if, they didn't play the best player each round they could have. But I don't think did this year. The draw was just a mess because of so many injured guys this year. So, the thing for me was the obsession with, Rafa and Federer haven't played each other, and seeing tweets about people dropping like thousands of dollars to get, semifinals, and, each of them getting asked about it round by round. I'm like, you don't learn anything from the past, do you? And people were just so sure it was a sure thing. And then what do you know? It doesn't happen again. And, people were super, disappointed. And I understand the role of superstars in sport. I mean, I completely understand it. But, I hope, I don't even remember what the crowd looked like for the men's semis, if people really still kind of showed up or whatnot. But,
yeah, it wasn't too bad. And
that's good.
The second women's semi was bad.
Yeah, actually, one of my best friends was there, and she said it really emptied out after Venus and Sloane's match, which, I mean, I suppose when I go to tournaments and I spend money, I'm pretty much there day and night. And, and maybe if there's a few night sessions like in Cincy this year that I didn't care about either of them. But, when it gets to the later stages of a tournament and it's a Friday night, and I'm like, I can't imagine just leaving after one match. But
yeah,
clearly we are not we're in the minority. But I find that super disappointing, because I would have thought people would have still enjoyed seeing, two Americans, at that stage, in that second match, but I guess not. So
yeah, and this is the thing that pisses me off about, like you saying, about the big Fedal hype, which is also without any context. It's like Roger's back is killing him. He barely made it through these opening rounds. Why do we want to see him playing Rafa like that?
Oh, I know.
It's not going to be a good match.
No, and I mean, it was clear with Federer. I mean, it was clear in the Rogers Cup final that it wasn't a good situation. He obviously pulled out of Cincy, and I mean, having to get through 5 sets when you're back, even if he would have not had, this is something that's probably never not gone away and never going to go away, without kind of giving it rest. But, and I think he said in press, oh, well, I kind of knew that I wasn't really in the physical, shape to win here. It's like, oh, well, yeah, but I suppose you just never know. Adrenaline kicks in. I mean, who would have thought that Del Potro would have come back from being so far down against Thiem, and then come back, and of course came out strong against Rafa. And then I went to something on the Vietnam War Friday night, and I missed all of Rafa and Del Potro. But I was listening to it on my drive back, and it was just in the last set, and it just sounded like Del Potro just lost. I mean, he'd fought so hard in those 2 rounds, and then he just couldn't keep the ball in play against Rafa after that first set, it sounded like. So but I still think there were some good stories on the men's side, but I'm sure most people for the takeaway will be, it was depleted field, and the bottom half was just an absolute open, huge opportunities for a lot of players. And yeah, I was happy with who came out of it myself, but sometimes you just have to take what you get.
Yeah, and I was thinking today too about that a lot of things are perspective. like, for Rafa fans, this is the most awesome tournament ever. They don't give a crap about how the draw worked out or whatever. It's like they were still nervous and stressing and
Sure.
still excited that he won, and then for other people who like other players, it's not so good. But I was just the thing about the Federer thing. It's like, if you really like tennis, for me, I was actually fascinated watching his matches because he completely modified his game to accommodate his back.
Okay.
Just for in this tournament. I mean, and was still winning.
Right.
It was like his, he usually has a really deep arch on his serve, and he was only going about halfway back. He was kind of serving like Stan, it was just that forward, just to, just slam it down, and still, making aces and stuff like that. And he was, I said he was kind of like massaging his way through matches. It's like he was kind of playing around the ball. It was it's like almost a surreal thing to watch. And it's like, he's so talented that even though he, is not playing his normal game, he's still figuring out ways to get it done. So,
well, it was so funny. I didn't see, in fact, I don't know. I really struggled this year. I had so many things after work functions, and it's just too busy for my work day. So it was really hard. I probably only had maybe 2 nights, and Labor Day weekend, of course. I did nothing but watch tennis, but I missed a lot of matches, and I was trying to follow on Twitter, and some of the commentary from people about like how awful Federer looked and some of his mishits, and it was just like I just couldn't believe what they were watching. But that's the thing about it. I mean, it goes, you can have in-depth conversations about players. I mean, I firmly believe you show up on court, your opponent takes you seriously. You can't, and you have to still win the match. It doesn't matter if they're injured or they play like shit. And so, and fans will want to say, oh, well, so-and-so was injured and so-and-so. It's like, but they took the court, so they're competing. Sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't, but, Federer tried it, and whether it was the right decision or not, but shit, I mean, he made the quarters, he could have made the semis, and who knows what happened. But but it'll be interesting to see. It would certainly be nice to have at least a couple of the bigger names actually around for the fall, in case anyone still cares about, the race to London. It's like, and of course it sounds like Murray's in doubt anyway, because he hasn't pulled out of every tournament, but he's pulled out of the next couple. He hasn't qualified anyway directly. I think right now he's 9. So potentially, I mean, right now he actually would be in 8th place behind, with Novak out. But if he doesn't play the next few months, I mean, I guess Stan's out too. He could still make it, but you would think, why in the world would he try and play London against the top guys when he's barely played, this year? And if he's still really injured, and weird year, but you just don't know what's coming.
Yeah, and it was like I digressed like 12 times. Original thing too about was, especially ESPN is very blatant about this, about the big names. Yeah, and it's like, and this is kind of an example of where that backfires on you, because then people are like, who are these people? I've never heard. And it's like, well, they're number 11. It's like, how do you not know who they are? Well, because no one ever freaking talks about them, because it's all about the Fedal, and Tammy did her on-court interviews, men's and women's side. Every single one I saw, she mentioned Federer. It didn't matter who she was talking to. She asked them a question about Federer, men and women, and I'm like, it was like a joke after a while. I'm like, is she seriously going to ask about Roger again?
Well, someone asked Rafa about it in prep. Well, no, maybe it was Pam asking Rafa on court, and it was only after like the 4th round match, and it's like, Pam, just enough already. Like, just because it's projected does not mean it's set in stone. And but they're their own, getting their own way, because they certainly want people to be watching a Karina Busta Anderson semifinal. But if all you've been hyping is this possible Rafa Fed one, and then, oh, look, we don't get that either. And here's our other semifinal that we haven't even really acknowledged. It's just
Yeah, and it's
Anyway,
like one
frustrating.
thing I used to complain about that they have gotten a lot better about is when they used to do all those flashy montages
Oh
for
yeah.
the match, it would always just be like 70 pictures of Serena and then that was it. And the other player like
Hmm.
didn't exist. It was like they were playing by themselves.
You
And
know, yeah.
it's
ES
like go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say, ESPN coverage of a slam, I suppose I don't know. I'm not, do you have cable so you're watching like the ESPN2 or ESPN
Yes.
feed? Yeah, and I
Yes.
have Apple TV, so I basically can pick the court. So
Right.
I don't have Shriver, I don't have McEnroe, I might
Right.
have I guess the other tier of commentators, and I like choosing the court just because I'm not losing the match due to desk time or interviews during the matches. I get to see the entire match. So
Yes.
that's what I tend to do. But ESPN's audience is probably not us hardcore fans. And
Right.
that's really what I struggle with when ESPN has coverage is that, they got to talk about something that happened 2 nights ago, or, they're going to go and do all this desk stuff, which I mean, my Twitter feed always explodes with people annoyed, like, show the tennis. Um,
Right.
and
Right.
so I'm thankful that that I have Apple TV because, ESPN just, yeah, it's not my station. Like, I'm not who they're trying to get to watch the matches and stuff. But anyway, so yeah, I'm looking forward to going back to other coverage soon,
Yes.
if that
Yeah.
exists. I still don't know. I still don't believe that I'm gonna be able to watch everything I want to watch this fall.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I with ESPN, the one nice thing about them having coverage of slams is that they have all of that online coverage. 'Cause
Hmm.
I do both. I have like the TV
Yeah.
on and then something on the laptop because most of the time the match they select is not the one I want to be watching.
Hmm.
And like you say too, it's like a lot of times I do want to watch a match from start to finish. I want to
Yep.
like absorb every bit of drama, but I feel like there's so obviously you're always going to find something to complain about, but I feel like
Yep.
with social media, I feel like they have listened to some of the things that people complained about.
Mm.
And I know there was when it was Roger was playing, I think at the same time as the Delpo team, and
Yes, and they actually stayed, didn't they? Or they
yeah,
split screened it or something?
they did both. They Roger was just starting and they kind of showed him coming on and whatever, and then they just went right back to the Delpo team, and I'm like, oh my god, they made an actual like tennis decision and not just the glamour, because it's like we don't need to
Yes.
see the start of Rogers third round, whatever it was.
Well, I
Um,
think they did cut away initially to show him walking on court because that's
yeah,
a vital, vital thing for
yes,
fans
I
to
know.
see. Like,
They're
there's hardly
so
even
good.
anyone in the stands, so why in the world would you need to see them walking out? Yeah, one thing that always annoys me with ESPN is they always seem to skip the first game of a set. It's like,
Yes,
why do you think that doesn't matter? Like, it's
right,
as important as every other game in the
right.
set. So, I was home with my parents Labor Day weekend, and so I brought Apple TV, but we were having trouble with ESPN. In fact, there were some problems with it this year. I know it cut out during Madison and Coco's match for a lot of people.
Oh,
I couldn't get ESPN 2 or 3 working at all, and a lot of fans had the same. I had to go to an illegal stream. I had to break my illegal stream fast because
that.
I have not allowed myself to use those really for a couple years. But yeah, so I was watching a little bit of ESPN 2, and so it's just a little bit frustrating to kind of be stuck with that. I just don't think that they cover the tournament that well, but you know, that's the breaks.
Well, we can switch over to WTA now and the Sloane Stephens, which also I don't think anybody would have in
I
their
still can't.
projections.
I still can't believe it. And I didn't get to watch the final yesterday. I ended up driving 4 hours, and so I did not. And I actually kind of forgot about it. And then all of a sudden, my mom texted me. She said, "Maddie's not faring very well." And then the next text said, "Sloane won." And I went,
Yeah.
"Well, I forgot about it." And what happened? And so I hadn't seen the score yet. And so I completely missed it, and I was at an event last night. I really just didn't have time, but um that was not the scoreline I expected.
Right.
I am sad that I love Keys. She's just one of my favorite players, and I didn't think she had it in the bag by any means, but I
Right.
kind of thought it was going to be closer than that.
Yes. Yes.
So that was kind of a huge bummer.
Yeah, I think there were two things. I think one was I think she did have a bit of an injury from the previous match.
Yeah.
Because we thought it was weird that in the previous when she was up, 6-1, 4-1 or something, and then
Right.
went
And
and had an MTO, and she kind of played it down and said she just felt a little twinge and she didn't want it to get worse. But then she came back out for the final with that, big, huge wrapping on, and I would say her movement was not at its peak. I mean, still doing what she could out there. And the second thing is she was, nervous and stuff like you would be, obviously.
Sure.
And Sloane was just so cool. I mean, it was amazing. She was just kind of like, I'm here, I'm ready to get it done. I don't care about anything else. And considering how Sloane has, battled with, her mood on court and stuff in the past, this was really impressive.
I thought it's funny because, obviously saw her in Cincy. I saw quite a few of her matches there, and, including the match against Halep, which I think she just kind of I think she ran out of gas against Simona more than anything. But I was really, of course, the Venus match was, she won that match. That, of course, to me, the first two sets were really weird.
Yes.
But that third set was amazing, compelling tennis. One of my best friends was there. It was her first ever live tennis match, and she was there that night. And she was just she said the crowd was phenomenal. It was just amazing. But I wasn't surprised at that stage that Sloane just seemed a lot more zen. I think Maddie's always been, she's an emotional player, and I think she's very much a perfectionist, I think. Where she just gets so down on herself for missing any shot. And, I think that Sloane's movement was incredible. She was always fast, but it's amazing to see her not that far out of the surgery, like moving that well. Like she couldn't, Venus couldn't put her away. And Venus doesn't need to get into these 20-shot rallies. And, of course, with Madison's legs, she wouldn't have been able to do well. She would have overhit just kind of like Venus. But, Sloane just seemed like nothing was going to ruffle her feathers. And that's a great attitude to go in to your first slam final. I think that, I was remembering that match against Wozniacki in Miami in 2014 where she won one game. I was there, people were booing, and we had Sloane pegged back then as someone who kind of, didn't care, often. And so it's been a really interesting transition. And that's why I always try to tell people to stop being so hard on some of the, younger players, because, not everyone is super mature. Most people are kind of bratty when they're younger. And I think Sloane's just really matured in a lot of different ways, and she has a new appreciation for the game. But talk about an unexpected win. Whoa.
Yeah, that was were you at the Makarova Sloane match in Cincy?
No.
That was way back on court 4 because of the rain delays.
No, I did not get to see that one.
Yeah, that was like a pivotal moment for me for Sloane, because it was such an interesting match. Sometimes being on those small courts is fun.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Because the crowd is like, 6 inches from the player, and this crowd was super involved. They were shouting out specific directions to Sloane. Like, go for the next shot, don't hit that so hard, be confident. It was hilarious. It was like a bunch of like motivational speakers in this every seat. And then there was an older woman a couple seats away from me that was like the tough love woman who was going, "You've got time to be tired later, get out there and break."
Wow, those are some specific things to say other than like go Sloane.
It was hilarious.
That's funny.
And so I didn't know. I felt like Sloane was actually like getting something from it because she, she got into, where she got down in the match, and she starts getting that, like you said, people feel like she's disinterested. She's like
Right, right.
depressed. You feel like all life is sucking out of everyone, and
Mm-hmm.
everyone just kept cheering her like crazy. They were like super into it, and it seemed like it picked her up, and she, fed off their energy, and she fought
Yeah.
back in the match, and it was like such a different thing than we'd seen from her in a while, and I was like, this
Mm.
is awesome. And then she had to play a second match that day, and she won that match too.
That's right. And then it was the next day she played Simona and she kind of had nothing
Yeah, she had
left
nothing
in the
left.
tank.
But it
Yeah.
was like you couldn't really, I was sad, but I wasn't like upset about it because what I
Mm-hmm.
had seen was like a really good sign. But I didn't think she was going to go and win the U.S. Open. That wouldn't have been my,
No.
it's
I
like,
just, yeah. I mean, and of course it easily could have been Venus. I mean, Venus had so many opportunities, but like I said, that last 5 minutes of that match with Sloane was
yeah,
incredible. Sloane hit so many jaw-dropping shots, and it was amazing. And as much as I was sad, I'm like, I can't be mad. I mean, I am still sad, but I can't be mad at Sloane for that. She earned that. She played so great. And so, as usual, it's going to be interesting to see um, how she can keep it going. I mean, it's been a heck of a summer, but isn't she like just back inside the top 25 now? Is that kind of where
yeah,
she landed?
yes,
And I mean, to start at 900 and something at the beginning of August. I mean, I'm not sure that someone's probably done the crunch the numbers, but it's like, when's the last time a player has improved their ranking that quickly, that dramatically? Because that is unreal.
yeah, it's,
So,
and I mean, every interview they had with her, it was kind of like she was in shock herself. I mean,
yeah.
she didn't really have they kept asking her like, how'd you do it and stuff. She's like, I don't know. I worked hard. It was like
Right,
that was
right.
all she had. It was like, it was no like,
She's
great
ranked
mystery.
she's actually ranked she'll be ranked 17 in the new ranking.
Wow.
I mean, like I
That's
said, it's just phenomenal. And she's just behind Coco at 16. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. Yeah. So I mean, and of course, the whole focus the last couple of rounds about, oh, it's four Americans, and yeah, I found it interesting when Coco and Madison. I don't think they framed it accurately, but they were talking about how they were so sick of hearing about the state of American tennis. But I don't think it's the state of it. I think it was the future, because I suppose just kind of like with the men after Agassi and Sampras and Courier, the next gen had the pressure to try to follow in the footsteps, which is really hard. And no woman is ever going to fill, the shoes of Serena and Venus. I mean, they're legends of the game, but
right.
there was such a focus on, oh, there's four Americans, and oh, American tennis is in good shape. And I'm like, well, it's been okay, and we've had someone that just won her 23rd major this year who's American. So maybe I'm sensitive about it. I did see a lot of people talking similarly. It's like, okay, but I guess maybe I haven't paid attention because I don't watch every single press conference. But Madison and Sloane seem to be like, oh, I don't want you ever asking me about American tennis. I'm like, well, I feel like there's on the women's side, it's a whole different story versus the men's side, which people have been pretty down on for a long time.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I feel like most people have usually clarified about that, state of American tennis, but the women seem promising. Like, we do have some,
hmm
young players doing well, and the thing about when they actually kind of first started complaining about it was Sloane and Madison were like both injured. So that was a big
right.
blow to the women's side because people were expecting them to start doing things. And so
hmm
they kind of started turning to Coco and then putting a lot of pressure on her, which is always their big thing. It's like they just pick someone and go, "You're it.
Right.
You're the future
Yeah.
of tennis." I mean, talk about I mean, that would just make your head explode to me.
But there's been some great runs. I mean, Coco's run, Shelby Rogers' run
Yeah,
last year. I mean,
yeah,
players are winning titles. Lauren Davis won a title. Obviously Madison and Sloane have both, I mean, just even before this year, I mean, Keys the top 10, and, you know, they made big whatever. But, you know, consistency is one thing, though, and I think that's just what people expect. But I don't know if we're not learning as we go, that there's not, I don't think consistency from week to week is really that realistic. You know, and if you're talking specific about the women's tour, I mean, players aren't winning like 7, 8 tournaments a year anymore. I mean, it's pretty rare. And so, you know, you look at like Garbiñe, and yeah, I mean, she looked flawless really for most of Cincy. Obviously came off the Wimbledon title. I mean, she ran into Petra, who was just, I mean, that was a fun match as well. But Garbiñe, she can be overhit. And of course now Garbiñe is number 1. And, you know, I saw people poking fun of her. I was like, good Lord, people. I mean, it's fine. It's the world we live in. But I mean, just because her number of points is the lowest for any number 1, apparently. But I mean, but there were like 500 players that could have ended the U.S. Open at number 1 or 12 or whatever it was.
Right.
So that's the reality. There are so many talented women. It's not, nothing's guaranteed. You can't take the court as a higher ranked player and expect that you're just magically going to win. And so, yeah, things are really close, and we could have, you know, many players ending the year as number 1. Does that mean that it's not interesting? But, you know, people want what they can't have. And if you have a dominating player, then they don't like it. If you have, you know, a lot of element of surprise, well, then, you know, the criticisms that, you know, you don't have any consistency. It's like, what do you want from me?
Yeah. It's like the Goldilocks thing. They want the
right
thing where I have like 6 or 7, you know, top players who always win everything, you know. But I don't know. I think that having people that you know, can compete on even levels, and, you know, watching matches and not knowing the outcome is a little bit exciting, because I mean, like, look at today's match, for example. It's like, here's 2 good players, but you know the outcome
you know, it was a pretty tall task for Kevin, but, you know, you still don't know. I mean, but I always find it funny. I mean, like I said, I mean, you know, I both followed tennis a long time, and, you know, when players get upset that are supposed to win, and then that player is supposed to magically turn around and win their next match, and when they don't, oh, well, they're terrible. Oh, that was a fluke. It's like,
yeah, right away.
Every match is different. The circumstances, the type of play, you know, I mean, you might have slept bad, or maybe, you know, people picked up things. I mean, things aren't exactly the same day to day when you're, you know, playing a sport. And so, yeah, there's just a lot of, oh, well, they beat that person, then they lost. What was the point? It's like, okay, that's just sport. So chill.
Yeah, and that it's funny how different thing that's happened in tennis than like from team sports, because, you know, a lot of people support their team and that hasn't won in 150 years, you know,
right
titles, and they still go and they still cheer the team on. And in tennis, it's kind of like we've had been in this era of people who are unbelievable. You know, I've got 15 slams. Well, no, I've got 7, I've got 23. You know, now people are expecting that from everyone.
Oh yeah.
And so it's like, oh, you won 1 slam, you're a loser. It's like, what about all the people who never won a slam, who played for 20 years and never even got close, who won, you know, got 2 quarterfinals or something, and they're happy about it because it's still amazing. You know, it's like, oh, you won 1 slam, you suck. It's just like, your perspective is completely insane. I mean,
well, or, you know, you have a really good run when you're younger, and then everyone thinks because you haven't been doing as well that you suck now. It's like, okay, but they might have 10 years of a career left. And, you know, I'm just looking at the top 10 for next week, and, you know, Pliskova obviously is dropping down to 4, and you've got, you know, Konta in the mix, even though she lost the first round, and, you know, Sveta, I mean, you know, very solid players. It's not like any of these players suck. And any one of them is capable of, honestly, winning the U.S. Open or sweeping, you know, Asia. I mean, they're all, I mean, I'm looking down. It's like, you know, Madison and Petra and Kerber. And then we get to Mladenovic, who, of course, can't win a match right now. And then, you know, Coco and Stevens. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I think the top 20 is full of so much talent, and I don't mind the unpredictability of it. I don't know how in the world the next few months is going to go or what Singapore is going to look like, but I know one of the players you want to talk about, of course, is last year's champ and the player who was on top of the world at this time last year, who is now going to be ranked 14 this week.
Angie.
Oh, Angie, I I don't even know what to say. You saw the full match with Naomi. I know you did said Angie was pretty awful. Um,
Yeah.
I it saddens me. I've always been a Kerber fan, and was not happy in Australia last year, but really that was Serena not playing great. Angie played great. She had a fantastic year in so many ways, but the narrative around her this year has been really sad. People are so awful to her, and she clearly just has no confidence right now. And I don't know what's going to turn it around for her, but to go out and it was first round, yeah, in the first round. I mean, getting Osaka is not easy. Osaka really should have probably made the quarters last year. She had the 5-1 lead against Madison, and
Yes.
she's very talented. But yeah, what's your take on Kerber and how she's lost her way this year?
Well, it was an interesting thing that that they said on the TV coverage, because one thing I noticed when we were in Cincy was we thought Kerber seemed a lot skinnier than she had in the
She's dropped
past.
a lot of weight in general in the last like 2 years, I think, especially. But she looks
Yeah.
really slight.
Yeah, and then and it was even like, like someone who had lost weight like too quickly, like her muscle definition wasn't as, because she's
Mm-hmm.
always been so solid with those, impressive
Right.
legs, and that's where all her strength comes from. And she
Mm-hmm.
just kind of looked, like you said, really slight, and
Yep.
she, just didn't look like the player that we knew before. And she'd been talking in press a lot about, I'm still fighting, I'm trying to find my form, this and that. But
Yeah.
I think they said Mary Carrillo had talked to her, and she said that all of the pressure from winning the slams, being number one and everything, she just like felt completely drained,
Yeah.
and that she wasn't working out or like practicing enough, and she
Mm.
just couldn't find the motivation to do it. And so she wasn't prepared, and then she'd go and lose early, and then she'd lose confidence, and then it's just
Right.
snowballed into this.
I was gonna say just a downward spiral, and I'm sure that I agree with that, and I think that she was just better as the hunter. I don't think that she just naturally was not comfortable, and I don't even know if you call it the spotlight, but the expectations on herself, and I think it's unfair though to act like last year was the only year she's ever done anything, 'cause she's
Right.
always been a threat. She's always been, I mean, she made the semifinals of the US Open in 2011. Like, this is somebody who has had, I remember someone said, maybe it was Courtney Nguyen, a few years ago, it's like Angie is must watch tennis.
Right.
And of course she would slip into her Dunn Kerber stages, but most players, it's hard to maintain 100% focus and motivation every single point of every match they ever play. But I'm really just saddened to see the confidence erode so much, and of course, coming in as defending champion, and to lose in the first round is just, I mean, it's not the bottom. I mean, she still is, in the top 15. I just don't know what's going to happen or what needs to happen to turn things around, because I don't know what her match record is this year, but she's going to be 30, I think, in a couple months. I don't want to think that it's not going to go back up for her, because to me she's so talented and it should, but I don't know what to say, but I'm sad.
Yeah. It's funny you asked about the match record, because I actually wrote that down.
Oh,
I think
look at you.
it was in a John Wertheim article. Last year she was 63-18.
Mm-hmm.
And this year so far, she still only has 18 losses, but she's only got 25 wins.
Oh gosh.
So,
Yeah.
so that's 40, like 40 less
Oh,
wins. Your confidence is going to be pretty, you know.
yeah. Well, and of course she, was runner up in Singapore, and I mean at this stage there's no way she's going to be obviously qualifying even for Zhuhai, I don't think. Um
Oh, yeah.
Gonna look at the race. I really haven't been paying that much attention. Um I mean, the race is interesting to a stage, but there's been so many races this year of like who's going to get number one and all that. But yeah, I mean, Angie is way down. I should look that up. Yeah, I don't think she's going to be playing. She's 18 right now in the race, so she's definitely not going to be in Singapore. But I mean, she could conceivably be in Zhuhai still, depending on how she does in Asia. But I thought it was cute, Petra. Her after losing to Venus, she'd mentioned that she'd asked her PR manager if Zhuhai was a possibility for her, and she just really wants to be playing more since she missed so many months. And right now she's 35 in the race, which, I mean, there's plenty of time to move up. She likes playing in Asia, even though, did you see her presser after she played Venus?
No, I don't think I did.
It was funny. Like, I love Petra, and I'm so happy she's back. And, she's not even back to full, 100% use of her hand, but she's just playing some amazing tennis. And she was talking about how she didn't really like Asia, but she always seems to do well there. It was just such a nonchalant kind of, rambles about Asia and everything. Anyway, it was quite funny. She's playing a lot of tournaments in Asia. But, she said, I missed 5 months. I'm just ready. I'm happy to be back on the court. And so, she could still end up playing in Zhuhai. But, yeah, I mean, at this stage, I mean, Ostapenko and Mladenovic, and, I mean, those ladies, I feel like, they were all doing great through the clay season. Then all of a sudden, it's just not been a great couple, maybe 2 months for either of them. And Konta has not had a good summer.
Yeah, that when we were talking about the the men's side, the people that kind of the up and coming players that disappointed, that was the Ostapenko Kasatkina match that everybody was really looking forward to, and it just turned into nothing, and Ostapenko did nothing. It's just like we were expecting that to be an awesome match, and then it wasn't. So it happens to the women too. Oh, did I lose you, Steph?
Oh, I got kicked out, but I'm back.
Okay.
Which match were you saying we had high expectations for?
The Kasatkina Ostapenko.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't take anything away from the fact that Ostapenko played amazing at French Open, played a wonderful final. But it's just, we just don't have, for better for worse, it's very difficult, and no player is really week to week, month to month a clear number one. And that's why the race is the way that it is, and that's why everything is so close, and who knows how it's going to end up. But but we probably should talk about the start of probably what most people would have said was the best match of the tournament, at least on the women's side for the first few rounds, was, of course, Sharapova drawing Halep, or vice versa, in the first round. And does that not feel like that was last year? It feels like that match took place last year to me, but
yeah, that's what tennis is now. We're in flashback.
I know.
Zone. I'm kind of in a whole protest Sharapova mode, so I.
Yes, I know. It still just doesn't, things just don't sit well for me. And talking about ESPN, I think that the way they were trying to just sugarcoat things, I mean, didn't Everett say, like, oh, well, when she was on her break or something? Like, I mean, it was disgusting. I'm like, fine, she served her set and she's back, but, like, let's not pretend that she was just off sunning herself for 15 months. I completely get it.
Yeah, and I felt like, honestly, when the commentators were talking about her, it was almost like there was someone standing there with a gun going, say positive things about Sharapova.
Right.
Because it just didn't feel organic. It just felt like we've got to sell Sharapova. She sells tickets. We don't care what she did, and so we're just going to pretend like none of this ever happened. And I think they finally started to, because there was like a big outcry on Twitter and stuff, especially about that, about when she came back from her break, after taking some time off. It was just like, oh my god. So I
I
noticed
know.
they started putting stuff in the crawl about Sharapova back from a 15-month doping suspension or whatever. They
Mm-hmm.
finally started owning up to it. And that's thing too, then this was the other thing I wanted to talk about, was that led to the big drama at the start of the tournament about Wozniacki complaining
Right.
about that she was getting Sharapova was getting Arthur Ashe like
Yep.
every night session. I mean, it was
Yep.
crazy.
Well, and I get, and of course we got more context later, and of course, players coming off a loss are going to be a little bit more irritated about things that have happened, but
Yes.
that was a whole mess of a day because of all the rain. And so, I mean, I'm sure there's many players that get jealous of names that are always on Ash because they're always going to get their match in, and so they've got the advantage already of other players. But both Garbinia and Caroline were basically thrown on pretty small courts. And,
Yes.
I think Garbinia hadn't even been given a time yet. I'm like, how are you doing this, people? And so, Ben Rothenberg later said part of the reason why Caroline was, making comments about it is she was pissed off because she didn't get good security. She got no security. Taking her, have you been to the U.S. Open last couple of years? So court 17 is kind of in the back corner, not super far from Ash, but I mean, it's a bit of a walk. You have to walk by like the food court and everything. And so I can't even imagine, because it's busy enough, like, with other players coming through, but, a bigger name coming off a match like that. And she had no security to escort her back, because all the locker room facilities and then the press stuff is all under Ash.
Right.
So, I can understand why she was even more upset. And of course, she lost in 3 sets to Makarova after coming back to win the second set. And then I think she got either 6-1 or 6-2 in the third. But, I mean, Maria is, she's not shy about shading players. And, she said something like, well, I'm in the 4th round. I don't know where she is. But, I can understand getting frustrated when, you're a top player, you're still a big name, and you get shoved on court 5 originally is where she was put.
Yes.
Caroline. And then, of course, being moved again, playing late. And because I think she got off the court at midnight, like it was a late match because of the rain. And then, basically being bitter because other players that you don't think deserve it are in Ash that are probably already in bed, nice and warm, and you're sitting there at midnight on site after, and no security to take you back to Ash. So, I understood why Caroline was upset about it, but everyone's like, oh, she's just a bad loser. I'm like, oh, whatever.
Yeah, that's the new thing that makes me absolutely crazy about that. And I've been personally happy that the WTA players have actually finally been speaking up about things that matter to them, that are important. And all anybody says now is, oh, well, try winning a slam, or,
Oh, right. That's my favorite. Like, oh, you're not entitled to an opinion because you're not as successful as other people are. I mean, yeah, that's the biggest bunch of bullshit. It's like, oh, well, so then really, so only Serena should be able to have a comment on anything, I guess, because she's won more than anybody. I mean, it's just awful. It's an awful perspective on it. And, like I said, I'm getting irritated on, just crap that people say about other players. And it's like, no, everyone's entitled to their opinion about it. Just because, she's not supporting your favorite player in this doesn't mean she's necessarily wrong. I mean, It's no different than being in a workplace and seeing like one of your coworkers get away with doing no work, and maybe getting paid more than you do. It's like, well, yeah, this is their job, and they just want things to be fair. So yeah, that was an interesting part of the tournament for sure. But scheduling, I feel like every slam we talk about it more at Wimbledon and the US Open than the others, but maybe I just have bad memory. But court placement and scheduling is always up for a giant microscope from tennis fans. And we're usually pretty vocal about what we're not agreeing with, of course.
Yeah, and it was funny because I know I would have been fine before people pointed out the fact that Caro has gotten, plum court assignments when her ranking was not that high, and things like that. It's like it's fine for people if you want to point out the irony of that, but I mean, she's talking about somebody who came back from doing something illegal, and is getting the red carpet treatment. And I think that that's the thing that's upset everybody. That it's not
Yes.
just, she can come back, she can play tennis. And I think people would have respected it way more if she had been on court 5
Right.
and battling through. And, this fact that, like you said, ESPN's going, oh, she was just on a break. She just took some time off to go to the spa. And now she's back. And then, meanwhile, Caro, who came back from injury, and other players, I honestly thought Sloane has really gotten the shaft at Cincy and at USO at the
Oh
beginning
my
of the
gosh, I
tournament.
know.
It was like she didn't exist. It was like, they were putting all these other players on main court, and like Sloane, who she's over on court 86. It was like,
right.
I don't understand. It's like, yeah, her ranking is low, but this is Sloane. She's an amazing player. She's worked. I mean, look at what she's done.
I know, right?
It's like,
yeah, because I watched her on grandstand, and then I watched her on court 3 against Gerges, and then of course with the rain delay, they shoved her all the way back on court 4, which was ridiculous. It's like you might as well have them play in the parking lot as far back as that court is.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting thing, and of course, Maria then will say, "Oh well, I would be prepared to play anywhere." I'm like, well, good for you that you say that. Just like she said, she would have been willing to play the juniors at Wimbledon. It's like, oh God.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just, I've gone through many different emotions with everything with Sharapova. Okay, that's the 3rd time I'm kicked out, so I think that means it's time to wrap up.
That seems to be our normal amount.
Right, 3rd time, and then it's like, okay, I get the hint.
3 strikes. So I'll just, if you have a parting thought about this U.S. Open, good, bad, ugly.
Overall, I'm happy with the winners. I can't say it was my favorite slam ever, but I don't know. I think it was kind of like, considering the roller coaster year that we've had between so many different things going on both sides of the tour, whether it's pregnancies or, poor Vika and her custody issues. And then we've got Federer's back, and we've got Novak and Andy. And it's just been a really wild year. And you know what? I'm kind of okay that the last slam of the year is done. We can just kind of, and I tend to switch off a little bit in the fall just because, I just sometimes can't really be super interested in some of the tournaments. I might be ready for my off season, but that just could just be burnout from watching, too much tennis this summer in general. But yeah, it was a wild U.S. Open. Tennis fans whine a lot, and I am just ready for a little bit of a break.
I totally agree. Feel about the same way about it. I'm super thrilled that Sloane won. That was really awesome for me because I've liked her for a long time. So I'm always happy when my faves, don't let me down.
Yes.
So thank you, Steph, very much for joining me.
Yeah, no, it's always fun to chat. And like I said, I felt bad. I was like, oh, well, I missed the women's final, but hopefully I can still offer some insight about things. But no, it's always fun to chat. And I enjoy getting cut off while we try and do the Google Hangout.
We'll figure out something someday.
Yeah, so anyway.
Okay, so thank you for joining me, Steph. And this has been the night session.